exercising, competing in sports, other activities while healing a piercing. We're going to talk about physical activities in healing a piercing next in Body Piercing Basics, episode number 29. So stick around. For those that are new to the channel or need an introduction, my name is DaVo. I'm a professional body piercer and have been since 1994. I'm the owner and operator of the Axiom Body Piercing Studio located in Des Moines, Iowa, inside Skin Kitchen Tattoo. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to go through some of the more common questions, concerns, in my suggestions. There's roughly about 8 of them, and we'll kind of get through that of either a suggestion or a common question that I'm asked, either on here in the comments section or in real life when clients come in. The first thing I'm going to tell you is with any piercing, regardless if you are physically active, competitive, if you have an exercise program, if you're going on vacation, if you're doing anything, plan ahead. Simple. If you're getting a piercing, especially in an area of the body that is going to have a lot of contact with either equipment or a lot of bending and straining, maybe it's best to do that during a period of time where you are not actively involved in that activity. For example, a couple different ones. If you are a swimmer, you cannot swim while the piercing is healing. So it might be best to do that during the off season. If you're involved in any type of activity that involves a lot of bending at the waist, maybe dance or etc., where you're going to be putting a lot of pressure and strain on your navel on a regular basis, maybe you shouldn't get a navel piercing, or maybe you should wait until you can take a break. Piercings usually go through kind of a tender phase that ranges anywhere from a couple of days with some people to a couple of weeks with other people. If you can cut back on activities that are impacting that area during that period of time, kind of focus on something else, that's going to be best. If you're involved in any type of activity, competitive or organized, or they're required to remove jewelry, chances are it's best to just wait until you're done with that. Even after you've gone through that healing period where it's no longer an open wound, removing the jewelry and replacing it all the time can damage the piercing, can cause you to lose the piercing, or cause other issues. It's usually best to pierce something and then leave the jewelry in for 2 to 3 years, only taking out to replace. It's safer, it's easier, you're gonna have the piercing a longer period of time. If you're constantly kind of reopening that piercing, it's gonna eventually lead to problems. So if you're in a competitive activity and they're gonna make you take out that upper ear cartilage piercing, maybe you should wait until you're no longer doing that anymore. Research the piercing. Talk to people that have the piercing, especially if there's people that are involved in some of the same activities you are. Ask them about what their experiences have been like, how it affected how they train, how they exercise, and how they compete. Nothing is better than firsthand knowledge of someone who's gone through it and experienced it firsthand. Also talk to your piercer. Usually a piercer, though to a degree we are kind of salesmen, we try to give you as much information in advance. At least a reputable piercer is going to discuss those things with you. And they may not be aware that you are an aerobic instructor unless you actually tell them and ask them about how that will affect healing out that particular piercing. Really consider exactly how that piercing is going to be impacted by the activities that you're involved with. Like I mentioned earlier, if you've got to remove the jewelry on a regular basis, it's going to really impact the piercing. If you're involved in some type of activity where there's going to be a lot of pressure on the piercing, then you want to kind of consider maybe another piercing or something that's not going to be impacted as much. So kind of think and picture in your mind's eye exactly how that piercing is touching things, interacting with the environment around you when you exercise. Now let's talk about probably the #1 question I always get when it comes to piercings and how exercise and physical activity is going to affect it. Do I have to worry about sweat? No, you do not have to worry about sweat. Sweat that comes out of your own body is going to be filled with microorganisms, but they're microorganisms that are part of your own ecosystem. You are covered with thousands upon millions, actually, of microorganisms that are part of the colony that is you. Stuff that comes out of you, except, of course, fecal matter. Don't fecal matter, bad. That's just bad. Anything else is acceptable to you. I know a lot of people like to use the thing like, yeah, urine's sterile. No, it is not sterile. To be sterile, it would have to be completely free of all microorganisms. Urine, sweat, other bodily secretions, saliva, etc., are full of lots of microorganisms, and they help to keep you healthy. They also, and they do this in a lot of different ways, including fighting off other pathogens or microorganisms, fungi, etc., that come in contact with you, but they also do that by limiting the amount of resources in the area so that if there is an invasion, there's nothing there for that invader to live off of. So if it comes out of your own body and it's body temperature, it's perfectly safe. Now, that gets us on to the next thing. However, if you go and sweat and sweat and sweat and sweat and sweat and sweat in that t-shirt and then put it in a gym bag and then leave it in the gym bag till tomorrow morning and then put it back on over that freshly clean piercing, there's problems. Different microorganisms will begin to collect and multiply and expand their reach of influences on that clothing. You should always put on clean clothes every time. Even if you're just going to go to the gym and dirty them up and sweat them, make them gross, you should put on clean clothes too, especially if those clothes are coming in contact with the piercing on a regular basis or in direct contact with the piercing. The next thing I'm going to talk about is cleaning equipment. If you're working out in a public gym, if you're working out at home or alone, if any of that equipment may possibly come in contact with the piercing, it needs to be sanitized and disinfected on a regular basis. If you're in a public gym, maybe you belong to the Y or some other, or like Planet Fitness or some other place, talk to the staff about how often they clean stuff. And don't always take their word for it. A sanitary wipes can be helpful, like an antibacterial wipe, especially if that piercing is going to come in contact or the general area is going to come in contact with that surface. Exercise equipment tends to be kind of gross when you really start thinking about it. Also, I always tell people tanning's a bad idea for the same reason. Make sure that whoever you are trusting in the disinfecting of this area is actually doing their job, or do it yourself and make sure that the staff doesn't have an issue with you doing that. Your health is more important. Avoid contact. If you have a piercing that is located on your body and either the equipment is coming in contact with it or may come in contact with it, or other people may come in contact with it. I've had a lot of people asking about martial arts. Try to do activities where you're not going to have contact with that piercing, with other people, the equipment, etc. This usually comes up, I always use the roller coaster analogy. Most of the larger amusement parks will have like the seat that you can sit in and test out how it's going to feel beforehand. And I always suggest, especially if you have ear piercings, that you kind of look around and see if there's any padding or anything that your head's going to knock against. Same thing goes with any piercing. And if you're exercising on machines or you're exercising in some type of environment or with other people, consider what kind of contact you're going to have with that piercing and how that might be abusive to the piercing. So plan that ahead and then adjust your training in one way or another to compensate for that. The next one, avoid certain movements. As I mentioned earlier, most piercings kind of go through a tender phase that can last anywhere from a couple days to a couple weeks. During that period of time, certain movements or activities can be very uncomfortable. A good example of that would be nipple piercing. Sometimes it kind of affects the pec area right under here, sometimes under the arms. It'll feel tight. Certain movements like push-ups or bench pressing or rowing is not going to feel good. Try to kind of concentrate on other things that do. Listen to your body. If it hurts to do something, you shouldn't be doing it. Cut back for a little while, do less of it, do something else to kind of compensate for that calorie burn or whatever you're working on, and then slowly start to wean yourself back into that activity. Very important that you do that. It's with exercise, you're more worried about destroying or tearing or causing physical injury. With piercing, it's more about just getting over that initial pain period and getting past that discomfort. And usually when it hurts like that, sometimes it's because the piercing is shifting, which is what we're going to get into next. Isolate the piercing and reduce the movement of the actual jewelry in the piercing. This is important, especially with female nipple piercings, because they tend to jostle around a lot and the area jostles around a lot. Lobes can kind of be like this with certain people. The more that jewelry moves around, the more it's agitated, the more you're going to likely to have maybe issues or problems, not only discomfort. Wearing clothing that is not necessarily over tight, but tight enough to secure the area and keep and limit the amount of movement that that area has, the better it's going to feel, and the less it's going to impact your ability to heal the piercing, and the less it's going to be able to, or it's going to cause problems with the piercing and impede you from actually exercising. The last one, safety equipment. This one comes up a lot with any type of headgear. If you have a piercing on your face and you're involved in, let's say, a sport that requires a helmet, I would suggest definitely doing it during periods of the year when you are not going to need to wear that helmet. The constant pulling and pressure and etc. will cause issues, just like sleeping on the piercing. Also, make sure that that equipment is cleaned on a regular basis if you share that equipment. It's always best to only use your own equipment, but even with your own equipment, clean it on a regular basis. Like I stated earlier, just with clothing of any type, if you leave that sweat and bacteria and everything against it, it's gonna get into a perfect storm and then applied to the piercing, and then you have an exchange of new foreign pathogens in the area and possibly an infection. So it needs to be sanitized and cleaned on a regular basis. Also, of course, avoid any equipment that's overly constrictive. If you're wearing it, it hurts to wear it, you probably shouldn't. And just take it as it comes. The thing with piercings is initially they're very tender and very, very active to anything that's around it. Just the slightest wind in some cases will make them feel uncomfortable. As you've had them longer, they tend to be less likely to do that. But anytime you have any pressure on the piercing or you feel like you're deforming or moving things, you're probably not going to have the best results in the long run. And the thing is limit that kind of restriction and also give those piercings time to get through that healing process. So I think that's pretty much all I have to say on this subject today. I hope that I've given you some things to think about, some ideas, and etc. If you have any further questions, please leave them in the comments. I usually answer the comments if I have time. I enjoy it. I love interacting with those viewers on here and sharing my knowledge and hopefully helping somebody through some problems. If you have had a piercing and exercised and came up with some ways to kind of cope with that, please leave a comment. I'd love to have you share that with our other viewers in the community that we're trying to build here. If you liked the video, give me a thumbs up, because that means you liked it and you like me and you like this content, and we all like that very much. If you'd like to see more videos on piercing and tattooing and body art in general, we do post anywhere from 3 to 4 videos a week on here. To make sure that you don't miss any, subscribe and hit the notification bell, because if you hit that, you're always going to know when we posted something. Another thing is, check out our merch store, link in the description. We have plenty of t-shirts, hats, etc. that you can purchase and look stylish and stunning in while you're exercising and doing some of those fun activities out there that summer brings about. Until next time, I hope all your piercings heal with ease and without a single issue. And if you're in the Des Moines, Iowa area, I hope to see you for your body piercing needs in the future. Thanks for watching.